government places the death toll at 518. Many Tanzanians say memories of those killings, together with continuing reports of abductions and disappearances, have left many people too afraid to take part in demonstrations. Opposition leaders accuse President Samia Suluhu Hassan's government of intensifying its crackdown on dissent. They point to the imprisonment of Chadema leader Tundu Lissu on treason charges and continued restrictions on political activity. The security deployment comes as planned protests approach, with authorities maintaining their warnings, while opposition figures continue raising concerns over political freedoms across the country ahead. In our next story, we are swinging over to Zambia. As Zambia approaches the 2026 general election, the contest is increasingly being framed as a national assessment of performance, expectations, and credibility. President Hakainde Hichilema's first term has focused on economic stabilization, fiscal tightening, and restoring confidence after the country entered office under severe financial strain. Progress in debt restructuring negotiations has helped restore credibility in global financial markets and reopened access to external financing. The administration has prioritized copper production, investment, agriculture, energy, infrastructure, and free education. However, many citizens remained concerned about the cost of living, employment opportunities, electricity supply, and access to reliable services. Opposition figures Harry Kalaba, Fred Mbembe, Sean Tembo, and Miles Samba argue that the government has prioritized fiscal discipline over social protection and job creation. The opposition also faces challenges from fragmentation and competing leadership ambitions. The election is increasingly centered on whether voters are satisfied with the pace of reform and whether they see a credible alternative. Whatever the outcome, Zambia's democratic system, peaceful electoral competition, and political transition continue to underscore the country's democratic resilience and national unity. Malawi's 5 public universities have doubled their tuition fees after the government approved a 100% increase as an emergency measure to address a deepening financial crisis in higher education. Secretary for Education Dr. Ken Dalla confirmed that the university submitted formal requests to the Ministry of Education, citing inadequate funding and mounting operational challenges. 3 options were presented, including full economic cost recovery fees, a 60% cost recovery model, or an immediate 100% increase on existing fees. The ministry approved the third option as the most practical short-term solution. Dalla said the government remained committed to ensuring that no deserving student will be denied access to higher education because of financial constraints. Education expert Wesley Mwambakulu welcomed the assurance but said words alone were insufficient. He called on the government to urgently improve student loan disbursement systems so financial support reaches those who need it. Mwambakulu warned that increasing tuition fees without reliable loan mechanisms risk pricing out the very students the government says it wants to protect, while placing greater pressure on the student loans program to expand its reach. Now that concludes our top stories. We now take a look at the weather predictions for Southern Africa before we return with Talent Gore. Now, before we get into talent story, a short update. The president will now be elected by parliament, not by direct public vote. The terms of the president and MPs increase from 5 to 7 years. The Attorney General must meet the qualifications of a Supreme Court judge. The president can appoint 10 more senators, increasing the Senate from 80 to 90 members. Voter registration moves from ZEC to the Registrar General, while a new commission takes over constituency and ward deliberation. Public interviews for judicial appointments are removed. A vice president acts as president until Parliament elects a replacement within 30 days. A new office of Judge President of the Supreme Court is created. The court may hear appeals involving important points of law if it grants leave. All right, now we get into some stories with Talent Gore, starting off with lithium miners in Zimbabwe that have asked the government for more time to build processing facilities ahead of a January 2027 ban on concentrate exports. Talent, can you get into the story?
Lithium miners in Zimbabwe have asked the government for more time to build processing facilities ahead of a January 2027 ban on concentrate exports. Zimbabwe, which is Africa's top lithium producer, has been pressing miners operating in the country to process more of the battery metal locally as it seeks to extract more economic benefit from the mineral. It recently introduced lithium concentrate quotas and imposed a 16% tax on lithium concentrate exports after ordering a temporary halt in shipments, citing mineral leakages. The Zimbabwe Lithium Producers Association said major lithium miners in the country were at various stages of building lithium sulfate plants, with only one, owned by China's Zhejiang Huayong Cobalt, completed and exporting chemicals. It is a strong appeal, or this was said by the Zimbabwe Lithium Producers Association. It is a strong appeal that we are presenting to our regulators that we finalize the work that is going on and extend the beneficiation ban maybe to June next year. This was said by Rukweza, who is the CEO of state-owned lithium miner Mutapa Energy Resources. We pleaded that we be given just a bit of leeway because the deadline might be a bit tight. The Mines Ministry did not immediately respond to requests for comment, and Chinese firms, which have invested about $2 billion United States dollars since 2021, dominate Zimbabwe's lithium mining sector, consolidating the Asian giant's grip on the global battery metal supply chain. Zimbabwe exported 1.13 million tons of lithium-bearing concentrate to China in 2025, accounting for about 15% of its lithium concentrate imports for the year. So the government has not yet responded to the request by the Miners Association that the deadline for them to build plants rather in Zimbabwe be extended to June 2027. The government had set a deadline for January 2027 for all the lithium mining companies in Zimbabwe to build processing plants in Zimbabwe to January. But right now, the miners themselves, they are asking for leeway. They are saying that 2027 January might be too soon for them. So they are asking for the government to extend to June 2027. When asked for a comment, the Mines Ministry was not we could not get a hold of them, but we are hoping that they will respond and tell us what they expect from the lithium miners. And
now, Zimbabwe has stepped up repatriation of nationals stranded in South Africa. Can you get into this?
Sweeping changes to Zimbabwe's constitution that will extend the presidential term by 2 years sailed through their final parliamentary hurdle on Tuesday and are now requiring only President Emmerson Mnangagwa's signature to become law. The amendments, which also scrap direct presidential elections, have been sharply criticized by opposition figures in parliament, where the ruling party, ZANU-PF, holds a parliamentary majority. The National Assembly voted 226 to 41. 226 were in favor of the Constitution Amendment Number 3 bill, whilst 41 were against it. The government has ramped up efforts to bring home thousands of Zimbabweans caught up in a wave of anti-immigrant hostility in South Africa, deploying dozens of buses from Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, Johannesburg and Durban to ferry returnees to the Beitbridge border post. The Deputy Chief Secretary in the Office of the President and Cabinet, George Charamba, said they were tracking bus movements across the affected South African cities as the evacuation gathered pace. The evacuation comes after anti-immigrant groups gave foreigners a June 30 deadline to return to their countries. Protests across South Africa on Tuesday last week saw marchers flood the streets. There were isolated incidents of violence and looting. In Cape Town, 3 buses had already left for Beitbridge, with a further 2 routed via Johannesburg for speedier processing of returnees. Charamba said in a statement, adding that once processed, the buses will make their way to the Beitbridge border post. 2 further buses were on the road from Port Elizabeth to Beitbridge. In Johannesburg, 11 buses were on standby at Zimbabwe's Old Chancery, where 600 people were being processed ahead of departure, while 5 more buses were stationed at Powerhouse processing a further 300 returnees. A further 12 buses from various pickup points, including Durban, left Johannesburg overnight for the Beitbridge and Musina border post. And right now, a lot of more buses are still coming in to collect those who are willing to come back home. But there are some Zimbabweans who are saying that we are not going back to Zimbabwe. We would rather die in South Africa, but we are hoping that they will be safe there. But most of Zimbabweans, they are being provided government assistance for them to come back home. There is a camp rather at Beitbridge border post, whereby they are being helped how they will be integrated back into society. For those with children who are in schools, there is also the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, which is helping to reintegrate those children back into Zimbabwean schools. So there is a lot that the government of Zimbabwe is doing to ensure that they bring back some citizens back home. But there are some who are still stationed in Cape Town who are sleeping in open fields, and it's raining and it's cold. There are some who haven't had the chance to be ferried back, but the government is saying that they are doing everything that they can to ensure that everyone is returned to Zimbabwe safe and sound.
It's always a pleasure to have Talent Gore bring us the latest news from the House of Stone. Moving on to economic news, rather. At the end of June 2026, the South African farmers had delivered to commercial silos about 5.5 million tons of the expected 17.3 million tons of maize harvest. Wandile Sihlobo reports on his X account. Let's take a look.
So folks, I've said here that this is an excellent year for South Africa in terms of grain production. And if you take the staple grain maize, our production is estimated to be around 17.3 million tons. That's the biggest maize crop on record in this country. And of course, it does place the country at a position where we'll continue to export and remain with ample supplies, because remember, our annual consumption of maize is around 12 million tons. But what's interesting is that the season started super late. Right now, for example, I was just looking at the data. At the end of June, the farmers had only delivered to their commercial silos about 5.5 million tons of maize. Of course, there is some on-farm storage of maize, but it doesn't constitute ample volume of that. We should ordinarily now be seeing some decent volumes being delivered, but it tells us again the point that I've emphasized on various occasions, that the season is late by roughly a month and more. The thing is, at the start of it was raining a lot in various regions of South Africa, so it was tough for folks to start on time. But also at the end of the season, it rained for much longer than it usually is. Ordinarily, you expect that it should rain and stop somewhere around about March. But what we saw happening this time around is that it actually rained throughout all the way to mid-May. So those late rains though will help in the next season, because it means that we'll be going on to the next season with better soil moisture and all of that. And it will be at a time where we're also anticipating that it will be a tougher season of El Nino and. So that soil moisture will help in that. But the key point I wanted to talk about now is that it's still busy out there in the fields. By end of June, folks had only delivered to commercial silos 5.5 million tons of the 17.3 million tons that expected. But of course, there's some on-farm storage that we will see. But it does appear that there will still be a lot of work. And we anticipate that perhaps maybe in July, that is where we will see really some good activity in terms of the maize being delivered to commercial silos. And the weather remains fairly warm, and hopefully then that will aid in drying up the crop and accelerating the harvest activity. In the maize that has already been delivered, we are not hearing much concerns about the quality. And in fact, it looks like this season's quality may be better than last year's quality. That's what I'm looking at now on the data here at the office as I observe as to what's happening with regards to the deliveries of grains.
And that's all the time that we have for you on today's Africa Good Morning. Don't forget to catch Africa Good Morning every weekday at 7 a.m. From me, Glenora Shipura. Until next time.